Image is a podcast of Redemption Church located in Huntington, West Virginia for the purpose of equipping believers to fully engage culture in a theologically faithful way.
All right. Well, I guess we can start. Let's say welcome back to the Redemption Church podcast. This is Cade. I'm joined with my venerable co-host Brandon Henderson,
Hello.
and our guest today is Mr. Benjamin Farrar Pewitt. Actually, it's Farrar, isn't it? That's how you pronounce the middle name. He's everybody's favorite banker, and our topic today is essentially to talk about personal finance from essentially a Christian perspective. So we thought, let's get our favorite finance guy in here. So welcome back, Ben.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here
Yeah,
on this snowy evening.
So you've been on the podcast multiple times, but you want to remind us real quick, just tell us a little bit about, who you are, what do you do, and what's your family life look like?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Ben Pewitt. I was saved at an early age and started becoming really serious about my faith in middle school and became pretty serious about it. I actually thought I was going to double major in business and divinity when I went to Gardner Webb until I realized I wasn't smart enough to double major.
Yeah, that's true.
There's an amen from the Elkins side of the Zoom cast. And so, but I had some fantastic mentors in college that an advisor, one or two professors, and then a pastor that were just really just helped me a whole lot, and helped me to realize that you don't, if everybody's a pastor and a preacher and a missionary, then there'd be nobody to grow the corn or the wheat or everyone has a role in the body of Christ. And so instead of forcing my way into traditional vocational ministry, try to do ministry through your vocation, whatever that may be. And so I did an internship at a small bank in 2008, and I really enjoyed it. That was the summer of '08 when everything was falling apart. Freddie, Fannie were going down. And then
And you enjoyed this.
Man, I was young and ignorant, and I did not understand the repercussions, right?
You didn't understand that old saying that may you live in interesting times. You didn't understand. That was actually a bad thing.
That was super interesting. And yeah, it was, and when I went back for my senior year, it was, I mean, yeah, I was talking with the professors, like a peer kind of situation. And enjoyed it enough that I knew I wanted to get into some sort of business finance kind of thing. So I've been in banking for almost 17 years now. I've had various number of roles, mostly in the lending capacity, but I've been a branch manager. I've been a sales clerk. I've had my fair share of collections, special asset workouts, that kind of stuff. Right now, I'm with Ohio Valley Bank. I've been there for almost 7 years. I'm a vice president of commercial lender there. And so I've been able to earn quite a bit of their trust. And so that means I'm a voting member on several committees, asset liability committee, loan committee, credit managers committee. So sometimes my time gets pulled away from me, but it's good. I enjoy that. I enjoy that. I enjoy lending, but I enjoy being a part of the bigger picture as well. So is that helpful? Kind of what you were?
Yeah, but you didn't mention your family.
Yeah, I did. So I outkick my coverage. I'm married to the beautiful Melody James Pewitt. We've been married. Oh, Ben, don't screw this up. 13 going on 14 years. It will be 14 in May. And we have two daughters, Lydia and Adeline. Lydia is 8, going on right out, almost. She's almost 9. She'll be 9 in less than a month.
Oh, really?
She will
Dang.
be. And then Adeline will be 6 in less than 2 months. So Adeline's birthday was March 10th, 2020. So it was right in the heart of, right before COVID. So they're awesome. I love them so much, and they're patient with me. So that is family life.
Okay. All right. Guess we can get started on some of the questions. In your career, were there any moments where your faith shaped a financial or ethical decision?
Yeah, that's not a daily situation, but it's more routine than you would think.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of times, yes, there are times where, you have clear cut, black, white, this is right, this is wrong. A lot of times it's not necessarily what you do, but how you do it. You can, when you're in finance, you're able to see and hear a lot of private information, and it's important that you're trustworthy. It's important that you're of high character, and we were we Chris and I were having a discussion about the church the other day up in his office, and if something were to happen with the money, it would be more of a reputation on my career than it would be. I would hate getting kicked out of the church or something, but like it would. So I would lose the trust of the community. So that's almost a daily, weekly kind of situation where it is of the utmost importance to have high character, because people are entrusting you with things that they don't share with anybody else. And here's the other piece. We live in a small community, and there are many, many times where I have two customers on opposite sides of the fence. One is a buyer and the other one is a seller, and they're both my customers. So I can't show favoritism. I can't go to one and say, you could probably get it for a little bit cheaper than what you're paying it for, or to the other one, like, you can jack that price up. So it's living in a rural Appalachia, small town USA, you got to be very, very, very careful, as far as ethics, and because as soon as you lose that, I mean, I've seen it. As soon as you lose that, people will not do business with you. And I don't feel like that's something you flaunt, like, I mean, you still have humility there. But it has to be a core of that, or you will not be successful in finance.
All right.
I mean, are there some biblical principles that you that come to mind when you think about just money and leadership? Because you're a leader in our church, and you're also a leader, at your job as well, being in a VP position. What biblical principles kind of lead you in decision making?
First and foremost, the thing that I come back to frequently is just the spiritual. I'm not sure if I would call it a law, but the reality of sowing and reaping. I mean, you see the idea of sowing and reaping throughout. A myriad of places in the Old Testament, but then also, I mean, in Paul's letters, I think Colossians, he says, do not be deceived, brothers, for a man sows, or for a man reaps what he sows. God is not mocked, right? I'm butchering that verse, but
Mhm.
I mean that, it finances and our personal finances are something that like is very similar to the gym. You were talking about your workout routine. Like you can't hit one or two gym days and then say, well, I,
I'm not
I'm
swole yet.
that's right. I mean, like
Yeah.
this is a long process, and it takes, a lot of sowing and cultivating, weeding, planting, watering, before you can reap a harvest. That's I think that's the one that's most prevalent that I think about the most is the fact that like, look, you sow good seeds, you will reap good harvest. You sow poor seeds and corrupt seeds, you will reap a bad harvest. The other one is, quite frankly, just the idea of faithfulness. Several of Christ's parables, has the idea of, you know, were you faithful? I'm always encouraged by, when I read in the Gospels about the parable of talents, and he doesn't get too concerned about how much the stewards bring back to him. His response is the same: well done, good and faithful servant. Except to the one that was not faithful, right? And so I find solace in the fact that God's going to take care of the results. And he doesn't as much care as much about the results as he does to make sure that we're just being faithful. Um, and as long as we're being faithful, then he will be sovereign over the results. Now that's hard. I mean, that's not our culture.
Mm.
That's not, we are a very competitive society. We live in a very competitive nation. Um, and so, it's either win or be fired, right? Like but the idea of faithfulness is so between sowing and reaping and he who is faithful with a little will be entrusted with a lot. Those two ideas are crux or core of, what I think about on a routine basis in my career.
Yeah. So you're bringing up the parable of the talents is a great segue for the next question. And basically, it's not about like Jesus wasn't concerned about how many talents in the example each person brought, but whether or not they were faithful. But in our society, and even there's sects of Christianity that believe that your success is based upon the dollars in your bank account. I mean, that's, we won't discuss the prosperity gospel or any of that stuff,
Mhm.
but, our society, nets or equates success with wealth. So, from your point of view, what does financial health really mean? And, like I'm assuming based upon your response, it's not just about income, it's not about net worth. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the term financial health means a lot to a lot of different people. You know, for me, I think there has to be a level of wisdom and discernment there. Um, a lot of my day is focused on helping people with debt. Um, and some people are very risk adverse, and some people are very risk
Comfortable.
aggressive, right? They
Yeah.
are they are totally okay taking risk. Um, and I need to have discernment to know how to encourage and when to encourage, because there are times where debt can be productive. Um, I, I look, I've taught financial peace and Dave Ramsey and that kind of stuff. And I think Dave Ramsey did a really good job of creating a rhetoric around unproductive debt.
Mhm.
I think he did. I think he created he articulated and built a rhetoric of this idea of keeping up with the Joneses and how completely damaging that can be to one's own not just financial health, but marriage and relationships and family. And so, but there are things that I respectfully disagree with him on, and there are ways to use debt that
I was going to
is
ask, I mean, like, if there's
productive.
anybody more famous among Christian finance guys than Ben Pewitt, it would be Dave Ramsey. So,
That's-
I mean, like, what are the pros and the cons of the Dave Ramsey mindset that you would comment on? Because I mean, even listeners in Redemption Church, if you say the words like, finance from a Christian perspective, the name that's going to pop in your head is going to be Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, listen, I really I still listen to him. I still not as much. He comes from it as a very dogmatic,
Hmm.
rough and gruff and coarse. And I'll be really frank with you. I I'm still a recovering Southern Baptist, and he gives me the heebie-jeebies sometimes because he has that core, like, this is what you've got to do, and you've got to do it every time. And I just
It struck me as a very legalistic
it was
type
yeah, and
of
I
financial
man,
advice, but
and even
which
if
is good for some.
what he's saying is logical, his tone and his dogma and his legalism and how he says it, it automatically stirs up cynicism inside my heart. So I have to limit how much I listen to him. But
Mhm.
again, one of the things he did was if if you have, look, we all have things that we need to be able to buy and finance to be able to live the life that we want to live. And so, but did a really good job creating a rhetoric around, you know, unproductive debt and especially credit card debt, because it's very, very hard to build wealth when you're paying, 20 to 30% in interest rates on credit card debt. But even auto debt too, because people, it's interesting how many people want to impress people at a stoplight that they'll never meet before or again, Um, those things
Mhm.
I agree with. From a core crux and basic, if you don't have to have it to provide for your family, you shouldn't finance it, right? To some extent. Now, um, as far as home financing, he always has the discussion, well, you know, pay cash, and if you can't pay cash, do a 15-year mortgage. Well, yeah, Dave, a 15-year mortgage is always less expensive than a 30-year mortgage.
If you have the
Um,
money for it, right? I mean, if you have the
the
down payment and
question
everything
the
for it.
the question is never, is it, or that's not true. The question is very rarely, should I do a 15-year versus a 30-year? The question normally for people starting out is, do I rent or do I buy?
Hmm.
And in those situations, right, it- for rule of thumb, most part, it is if you can afford to purchase it, there are some major benefits of purchasing a home. Now, that doesn't mean, if you're only making $50,000 a year, you go out and buy a $750,000 home. That's different, right? But being prudent in those decisions. And so, yeah, I mean, in my master's program, part of my one of my papers was the difference between relative value versus absolute value. And and I used the 15-year mortgage versus 30-year mortgage as an example. Um, and so the math is correct, but his assumption is incorrect, because it hardly ever is the difference between a 15 and a 30. The only time you really get into it, should I use a 15 or a 30, is when you already have a mortgage and you're thinking about refinancing, and the refinance rate on the 15 almost makes your payment the same as the 30. At that point, then you just keep paying the same payment. You just cut your mortgage in half. Um, and there's some other times. I mean, that's not the only time. And one of the things that we need to make sure we say in this podcast is that every single person's situation is different, drastically different. I mean, even if you have the same, even between the three of us, right? The three of us are relatively the same. We we are within 3 years. Brandon, how old are you? 42?
42.
42. Cade's
Mhm.
40, and I'm
Mhm.
about to be, and I'm 6 months from 40. So we're all
Yay.
within
Welcome to the
3 months,
early
3 years.
welcome to the 40s.
We're all within 3 years of each other. We all have two children. I don't think none of the three of us plan to have any more. Um,
Nope. Nope.
so
Done.
we all go to the same church. We all three go to the same church. We all three live within 7 to 9 miles of each other.
Mhm.
Yep.
Brandy, you
I,
probably maybe 10 miles away, right?
I could still run to your house if I really wanted
If
to.
you really wanted
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
That's for
I
someone that's
couldn't
a
do that.
marathon runner, that's not much. But I mean, like, so yeah. And yet our situations are extremely different when it comes to the finances, right? I mean, you bring in like uh different, parent situations, like are you bring in different needs from different children, you bring in, health situations, you bring in jobs, uh it's just different. And so when we talk this evening, it's very much in general terms, but in finance, there are very few absolutes because everybody's situation is different. Um, and so I want to put that disclaimer out there. But yeah, so in summary, Cade, I disagree with some of his views on productive debt. Really, you're financing your home, financing business debt. And then I disagree on some of his views on investing.
Mhm.
I don't think mutual funds are a great investment. I've got a myriad of reasons why, but I mean, he talks about mutual funds a whole lot. And so there are these new products called index funds that are much lower cost and, have just as much, if not more diversity. So, but for the most part, he really helps with the basics of, the biggest thing he does is help keep people get a budget. And that's probably, even though that's the most boring, unsexy thing to discuss, that's if you can have a budget and relatively stick to it, you're so much further along than most people in the world. So
I kind
Well,
of think the Dave Ramsey school of thought is it's good for people that know about themselves. Like, I don't really have any real discipline about finances. I don't know anything about money or about how to budget, so I'm just going to do what that guy says. I think that probably works just fine for those
that's
people.
fantastic, right?
Yes,
Absolutely.
and there's nothing wrong with that. But
That's
if
exactly
if
right.
if you're a little bit more advanced, like Ben, you've
Well,
got more options.
business owners, honestly,
Yes.
business owners, right? I mean, you think about the makeup of our church. We have several individuals that are business owners in our
Hmm.
church, and in those situations, those really broad generic rules of thumb don't always apply in the same manner. And so, you know, that really, and also the other piece is, you know, I as you get older, your financial situation changes also, and that's different, right?
Hmm.
So anyway,
yep. So
but
you
for
brought
the
up
most part,
budget. So you brought up budget. This is one of the items we were going to talk about later, but we might as well just jump to it. So okay. Um, I think we can all agree that a budget is really important, but we also, so we talked about the makeup of our congregation. We also have a lot of young people, some college students. We have some high schoolers. We have some people that are, just starting to get into independence. And I remember when I was young, I didn't think a budget was important. It's a lot different than the 42-year-old Brandon. Like, budgets are essential. So tell us, how important is budgeting? But more importantly, how do you make it actually work?
yeah, okay. So let's tackle the first question. How important is budgeting? It is, I would argue it's the most important. Let me say this. Being a professional in whatever career profession you've chosen or are currently in, sometimes we don't choose it, we're just in it, and we're transitioning from one career to another, and that's fine. That's especially younger individuals, and that's perfectly normal. I would say when it comes to finance and money, the most important thing is become a professional in what you're doing. And I'm not talking about becoming a workaholic. I'm not talking about, you know, grinding and the fire movement and all that stuff. I'm just saying, you know, and I'm not saying that your career is your identity. That's not what I'm saying. But become a professional. Be good at what you're doing. And the reason I say that is once you do that, your earnings potential, your income will be stable, right? It'll at least be stable. Now, it might not be where you want it to be. It might not be where you think it will be, right? But it'll at least be stable. Once it's stable, then you can build a budget. And when I say stable, I mean relatively predictable. Now, it can be cyclical, right? A lot of businesses have cyclicality to it, right? A very much predictable up and down type of situation. We've got a couple of realtors in our church, right? People don't want to buy a house right now, right? Like there is seasonality to the real estate market. You don't see a lot of movement in November and December and January and February. You don't. And their income is not great, right, in those months. Now, there are some that are pretty consistent, but it is higher in some months than it is in other months. So again, even though that's cyclical, there is a predictability to it. But once you have become good at your craft, whatever that is, then you have some predictability to your income. At that point, then you can budget. And so the big thing about budgeting is it's living with intentionality, right? Look, this is a term that Dave Ramsey kind of coined, is telling your dollars where to go and what to do. If you don't, then, it's interesting Melody and I had a conversation yesterday about sometimes snow days that are Saturdays just get away from us because we don't really have much structure, right? There's not a routine and somehow time just kind of slips away. And so the same thing happened to your dollars if you don't have some sort of structure. And when you do have that, then you're able to say, okay, I want to be able to do, you can reverse engineer what you want life to be like. Now you have limits and constraints on that because your budget is going to limit you and constrain you to that, or your income is going to limit you and constrain you. But if you say, hey, look, I want to work my way up to being able to tithe a certain amount every month, or I want to sponsor a child through World Vision or Compassion International, or I want to buy that house or that car. I want to be able to send my kids to a private Christian education. It's living with intentionality. And I think I think that's good. I think that's, quite frankly, I think it's biblical in the idea of what we read in Proverbs. Does that answer your question, Brandon? Budget, like why it's important and
Yep. Now how do you make it actually work out? This is where I guess the discipline side comes in.
Well, what I was thinking about when you were talking about, essentially being a professional, and there's multiple ways you can take that. You can take that as just being reaching the pinnacle of your field as being a professional, but it's just in terms of like your work ethic and your demeanor, you can be a professional as well, right?
Absolutely.
But I
No,
was
and
just thinking like that not only has the potential to bring you financial windfalls, but it also just honors God, and
absolutely.
it shows other people that like this guy works hard because of his faith, and that's worthy. So
Absolutely. No, there's so many ideas on, again, that's faithfulness, right? I mean, that's the idea of faithfulness is being faithful in that area of your life.
it's like, because
Um,
I mean, like me as a teacher, right? If I work really hard to deliver a good lesson, do I get paid any more than a teacher that just gives a worksheet? No, I get paid the same. But there's honor in actually doing a good job and being a professional. So
yeah, I'm gonna butcher this quote, but it's a quote from Martin Luther, I'm pretty sure. And it's basically that says, God doesn't God doesn't honor the cobbler who makes good shoes because he puts little crosses on the shoes.
mhm.
It's because he makes good shoes. He doesn't honor the maid because she hums a tune or a hymn while sweeping the floor. Is that she does a good job sweeping the floor.
Mhm.
Now, again, that I completely butchered that, but I'm pretty sure it was Martin Luther who said that. And again, that's exactly right. It's and the other piece too is I sometimes get people from they're like, oh, I want to do flip houses, or oh, I'm doing a side gig, and and I think what a lot of times we sometimes have like career ADD, and I think people want to jump or diversify when they really not spent the time, energy, and effort in just getting good at your craft kind of thing. Now, to Brandon's question, okay, how? This is where this is where you have to think about what y your strengths are and what you have at your disposal, and or your spouse or whoever's helping you. Because look, I can tell you right now, I would hate your workout, right? I don't want your workout. I've got to work out. I know what's good, right?
Trust me, I've
Yeah.
I've done Brandon's workout. I hate
Now,
Brandon's workout. So
now I don't have a six pack, right? I'm not jacked, right? But I'm okay. I would like to think I'm in decent health. And I work out pretty hard. But my workout is not running by your house like your workout is. And so everybody's going to be different there. Obviously, I'm a finance geek and a nerd, and I use Excel. But there's a lot of people that use all kinds of different apps. There's all kinds of different things out there. Again, when we get into like, should you use this versus should you use that? That's the difference between like, okay, should I be swimming 2 days a week or should I be doing CrossFit 2 days a week? It the the benefit from turning those knobs is that last 4 to 5%. The real 85% is just doing what's good, right? Just budgeting,
mhm.
right? Like having a plan, and making sure you're relatively sticking to that plan. Doesn't mean you can't go out to eat and have a date night, or go buy the kids a birthday present, so but the point is living with intentionality. So the how is one of those like, man, you know, here's a good example. I I spent a large majority of my childhood and teenage years getting yelled at by a coach. I'm done with that mess. I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want somebody to tell me to pick up a weight. I know like Melody. Melody loves going to classes, whether it's yoga or spin or Zumba or some sort of body pump or whatever, right?
Where
Like
there's some trainer telling you what to do.
tell her, like
Mhm.
and she says, all I have to do is show up and do what they tell me to do. And that sounds miserable to me. Like like I want to throw the weight at somebody. Like, and
Mhm.
she does it at freaking 6:15 in the morning. That sounds miserable to me too.
Ugh.
And so the reason I say that is, again, everybody's going to be different, and it's just a matter of. And look, here's the other piece. Try one. If it doesn't work, throw it away. Try another one, right? Like just figure out what's good for you, what's good for your family. I mean, some people have it on their iPad or their iPhone. That would drive me nuts. I can't see the whole spreadsheet on an iPhone, right? But that works for them, right?
Yep. Yep.
So some
Well,
people,
Brandon mentioned something a few minutes ago about talking about, or I think maybe it was you, Ben, that mentioned like, there's quite a few young people in our church, right? And so like, what advice would you give to the youngins that are getting ready to graduate from college? And, some would, I mean, affordability is like the political hot button issue right now, right? I mean, both parties are saying, or they keep talking about affordability is like a talking point, right? So like what advice would you give to somebody that's getting ready to graduate and they're looking for work? Like how do they who are just starting out, get financial health? I know we're talking about like budgeting and stuff, but is there any other advice you'd give to a youngin?
yeah. So I'm going to answer that. Do y'all remember? Did y'all ever do in school the object lesson where the teacher gave you like a mason jar, and then they gave you like marbles and then sand and then water,
Hmm.
and they said, "Hey, we all these things can fit in that mason jar, but you got to figure out the order." And 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 they always would take us outside, right? Because it was a ring-eyed mess.
Mhm.
Yeah, guys throwing marbles at each other and putting them in the water, And the point to the object lesson was the way you the way you fill the jar with as much as you can, or the right things that you can, is you put the marbles in first, then you put the sand in, and then you fill the rest with water. And so my answer to those that are fresh out of university or still in college or whatever is figure out what the marbles are. What are those? What are those non-negotiables? And start it now. Um, Listen, if you think it's hard to tithe when you're in, you know, a sophomore in college, how hard is it going to be when you've got like diapers to buy?
Hmm.
Uh, right? Like, and you've got a 2-month old and you're buying formula and diapers. Um, you're trying to, get out of the place you're renting into a house because every time the baby cries, somebody bangs on the wall. Like, so, start those things now, put in a structure now. And I'll give you some of the marbles in my opinion. Number one is,
That's gonna
uh,
be my next question. So go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, okay. All right. So number one is start your budget, right? Like start figuring out and you're going to hate it and you're going to throw it away, and you'll cuss it and then come back to it. Start budgeting. Number one. Okay. 401k match. Just do it. Right? Just whatever your employer will match, do it. Put it in there and just don't touch it. Leave it. Right? Diversify the portfolio between I'd probably go 25 like quarters, quarter in uh large cap, quarter in small cap, quarter in bonds, and a quarter in international stocks, right? And with young people, that's you're saying, well, Ben, that's 75% equities, and yeah, it is, but they're 25 years old, so that's all right. But just go ahead and start 401, make sure you're matching your 401k. Tithing, again, I do not want to come off as legalistic. We live under a new covenant. Christ has paid that. He let his disciples, you know, pick the grain and the wheat on the Sabbath and laugh at the Pharisees, right? So we don't live in an old covenant mindset. At the same time, though, like God has called us to share and to give and to do so joyfully, and to plug into the body of Christ, and that does mean financially. And again, if you can't afford 10%, don't give 10%. You know, give $2, but do it right and do it intentionally. And start that process now, right? You know, I one of the best things I had one of the mentors I talked about earlier encouraged me to adopt. I had a roommate. I had a roommate in college, and he and I adopted a kid from World Vision, and we were serious about it. About 6 years ago, he graduated out of World Vision, so we've kept that, and now we have another one. So my point is start that stuff now. So budgeting, 401k match, thinking through insurance is another a marble or a rock that is a big thing. What does that look like? That's something that that's going to change throughout your life. You're
So
going to think about
so
insurance,
when you say insurance, what kind of insurance? Because
all of it.
all of it.
All of it, right? I mean, again, it's not a do this, do that. It is, okay, think about what that looks like, right? So, for a young person that's single and right out of college and really healthy, medical insurance is not it's not a huge ordeal. For us three dudes at 40 with a family and two kids and a wife and two kids, that's a big deal, right? That's part of playing defense. So being able to understand those things, know what a deductible is, know what a premium is, know what an out-of-pocket max is, man, those are hard things. And listen, insurance is really complex, and that goes back to your question, Cade. It's not just housing that they're talking about affordability. It's a lot of
it's everything.
It's everything, and some it dives into groceries, it dives into medical insurance. Look, a single person that's 23 years old doesn't have a family, they don't need life insurance. The three of us should have life insurance. If something were to happen to Brandon, Brandon needs to have enough that Laura can get the boys into college. And then once they're in college, then she can do what she needs to do. But let's get Aiden and Noah into college,
Mm-hmm.
and out of the house, without her having to kill herself to make ends meet. And I'd say the same thing, about Avery and Leo and Lydia and Adeline.
One of the questions down here, we've hit on a lot of the other stuff in our ramblings here, but like one of the questions down here talks about this is getting into like marital stuff here, but I might be wrong about this, but I think that like even now, I think financial difficulty is probably cited as the number one cause of divorce. If it's not number one, it's real high up on the list. Would you have some advice on how couples could avoid money becoming like some sort of constant conflict in marriage? Like, how do we keep that from being a source of marital strife?
Yeah, it is not a narrow. I don't have a narrow vision of this, and here's why. I have a lot of customers who own businesses, and some of them are in it with their spouses, and some of them aren't. Some of them pool their money, and right, it's one big pot, and they pay bills out of it, and some keep it completely separate, and they say, okay, uh, one will say, I've got the house and the car, and the other one will say, okay, I've got the electric, gas, water, and sewer. Uh, and I'm telling you, if I were to say one's better than the other, I'd be lying to you, because it all comes down to what works for you and your family.
Mhm.
And so it is one of those things that to avoid conflict, the best way to do it would be to plan and communicate, and then vocalize when things seem to be going astray. Um, the biggest issues I see around money and marriage is that it's either going into one pot or it's not, and it's separate, but it's not equitable, meaning that the one spouse has all the bills and the other spouse gets to go and spend whatever he or she wants. And
Mhm.
it's not just women, and it's not just men. I can't tell you how many times I've seen like dudes that are quite frankly sinfully passive when it comes to this kind of stuff, and they just want to go to a bunch of concerts or a bunch of football or basketball games, right? And they spend all their money buying SEC
Just,
tickets.
junk they don't need. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, you talk about stress. So here you have small kids, and not only are you spending, I mean, look, I mean, you can spend three, four, $500 a ticket to go, to Ohio State, or, any type of, Power Five game. And not only are they spending that money, they're, you know, not spending time with their family, and that kind of thing. And so the biggest thing I can encourage the people out there is to communicate expectations. And when there is some sort of, I guess, unmet expectations, that you vocalize it and bring it. And the good part, again, I go back to the budget situation. A good part about having a budget is, regardless if you do two separate accounts or one complete primary account where both incomes come into one account, if you have a budget, then you've already talked about it. You've already agreed upon it. Between both spouses have agreed upon it. And at that point you can say, okay, well, this is your fun money and this is my fun money, or hey, things are too tight, or hey, look, we're actually not in a great place, where we're renting is not a good part of town. We want to buy a house someplace else. Let's not have any major, expenses other than saving for a house. But whatever it is, it's agreed upon. And then if that changes, then whoever's trying to change that needs to say, okay, I'm pulling an audible here, and I want to change it. So I would say, again, the planning and the communicating, and then agreeing upon. And again, 6 months ago, Melody and I were going we had an event. I think it was a chamber, kind of like we had a couple of nights ago. It was a chamber of commerce event. And then, since we had a babysitter, we were just going to go and had a dinner date afterwards. And she saw me get in the car with a spreadsheet and said, "Don't you bring that spreadsheet to our dinner date," which I have done a lot of times in our marriage, a lot of times in our marriage. And there are times where she suffers through, and there's some times where she just puts her foot down and says, "No, we're eating dinner and enjoying ourselves tonight, not not going over a spreadsheet." But 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 you know, you'll she at least will, sit down with me and talk it through, and say, okay, what are our priorities? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we kind of behind the eight ball on these certain things? And so tackling it as a team rather than competing over limited funds is, I think, the biggest key. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I totally relate because the first fight I had with Laura was over an Excel spreadsheet because I wanted to start these Friday family meetings when we first got married, and basically it was just to go over the budget. And I had an Excel sheet. It was color coded with like the priority things and where we're doing good and where we're doing bad. And the first time, I think she kind of like, just kind of went through the motions, and the second time it was obviously she's just like, this is not how we're gonna do this. Um, I think the biggest problem was I chose like, Friday nights, that's the night she probably expected, oh, Brandon's gonna take me on a date, we're gonna do this. To me, spreadsheets are romantic, man. I love p-values, math, statistics. I had to learn Laura's love language, and it is not an Excel sheet. So
You,
You know what's
you
been the
guys are
hardest?
you guys are dorks. You're both dorks.
Yeah. What's been interesting in our marriage over time is what happens is the 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 I wouldn't call them fights, but the conflict has what has been conflict has changed over time based on what's been the most scarce. And I'll explain that. Early in our marriage, what was the most scarce? Well, we were right out of college and in our master's program, and I up to our eyeballs in student loan debt because we just finished our master's programs, and money was a lot of the conflict because that's what was scarce. Honestly, anymore, money is always a conversation to some extent, but it's not necessarily a conflict as much as time is now, because with having two kids and two career, Melody is a working mom, just like I'm a working dad, and we want to be faithful in our church family and our gospel community, and then also, friends and family obligations, and then kids going every which direction. We're not rich, but the most scarce thing right now is time. And I protect it. I mean, Cade laughs at me, but I tell people no with a fervor. I mean, I'll just, hey, Ben, you want to go do it? Nope. Sorry. That's allocated. That's done. Right. And Melody's like, oh, but what if they don't ask again? I'm like, well, then they don't want it. They're really not my friend then. I know Kate Elkins, and it's going to ask.
If they really want a piece of this, then they can wait a little while.
yeah. Ben, I'm still waiting for my lunch date.
No, that's on you, bro.
No, you called me on the busiest day that I had in like literally forever. But I already have my way in. My way of hanging out with you is the fact that my wife loves hanging out with your wife, and then they're like, let's get together, and then we're kind of drawn in on that.
That's right. That absolutely that works.
It's like,
but yeah, so my point, but one of the so I say all that to say that over the past, let's say, well, since Lydia was born, so over the past 7-8 years, the biggest conflict with us has been geared around time. And what we do is we meet it's either on a Saturday or a Sunday morning when the girls are either just getting up or they're just, watching cartoons or whatever, and we go through the week. And in fairness, part of that was a byproduct of me leaving Lydia at gymnastics one time too. So that's probably one. That's I still think she's emotionally scarred by that. But yeah, we have to do that, and that's honestly that's not area of pride of like, oh yeah, our marriage is so great that's what we do. We take an hour and a half every week to plan. We have to, like, it's almost like, no, that's what we have to do to make it function. So there's no pride in that. It's just like we have to do that, or I'm leaving a kid at gymnastics or ballet or something. And so anyway, I say all that to say, just as you grow in your marriage, conflict will change, and what you have to be consistent is to be gracious and to be patient, to love your spouse like Christ loves the church, and to communicate, So
Yeah, we went from finances to marital advice.
I think the first fight that we ever had when we were married was when I bought a drum kit that was.
Taking it
She's
back
like,
to finances.
you spent how
Yes.
much on that
How
drum
much was that
kit?
drum kit? How much was that drum kit?
Oh, I think everything together was probably like $900,
Yeah, that was a whole
and
paycheck.
yeah.
You spent
And
a
I was
whole,
like, hey, you don't
and it's
understand.
like,
I haven't had a
what are
drum
you?
kit in 10 years. I need
What?
this.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you guys talk. I could just see Anna Elkins being like, the reason you can afford that with your paycheck is because I'm paying all the bills for in this
That's
household.
right. That's right. You're still in school.
Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting too, though, is like, I, some of those conflicts sometimes have a way. I think God allows some of those conflicts sometimes because it has a way of like jolting us, like jarring us awake. I remember, I'm sharing a lot of marriage. I hope Melody's okay with it, but I remember one time we were on a trip to see one of our parents, either in Tennessee or North Carolina. And at some point in the trip, she broke out this fancy pants hand sanitizer. And I don't know what it was. I was being a jerk. That's what it was. I was being a sinful jerk. And I said, "Where'd you get that? We've got a whole bottle of Walmart sanitizer." Like, it was a Bath and Body Works, literally this size. Bath and Body Works. Like, I buy hand sanitizer by the gallon. What are you doing with that? She's like, it was $7. I was like, $7 for hand sanitizer? I get the whole gallon for 13. Like, what is? And I remember like us having it wasn't a huge fight, but like I wasn't being playful. Like, I was being critical. And then and I had to apologize. And then I remember thinking on that drive, like, it's time for me to like start working hard enough and being disciplined enough that I don't get wrapped around the axle about a little $7 bottle of hand sanitizer.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was, I mean, that was, we probably weren't even, we might have been engaged or first year of marriage, but like, my point for saying that is there's sometimes as men, we get in a routine and we forget that, hey, we have responsibilities, and sometimes it's a matter of us to, I just remember thinking like, yeah, I need to grow up a little bit. And part of that growing up is to get good enough at my craft to where I'm not worried about a $7 bottle of hand sanitizer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can think back of, probably around that same time in our life that when we were first married, and I was like, wow, I can't keep doing this midnight shift job that pays barely above minimum
Starbucks.
wage. I gotta get a real job. It's like I gotta get like a real man's job now. And I was like, well, that's good though. You should do that. That's some advice. I mean, that's some very basic advice we could give for the youngsters. Get a real job, even though it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I also wanted to say I did apologize to my wife for buying that drum kit later, but I want to say I sold that kit for a profit at a later date, just for the record.
Yeah.
All right.
What'd you do with the profit?
I bought a better drum kit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Is that the same drum kit you have in your basement now?
No, that's the one after the next one. Yeah, the one I got now is that's the dream kit. That one's going
Yeah.
nowhere. But to be fair, I've used these gifts for God's glory because I used it to upgrade the church kit too. So
Oh, that's good. That's good. I do not bill by the hour. I'm not like a CPA or an attorney, and so I don't bill by the hour. And so if someone is,
no, I actually like if Ben would actually pay you to come talk to him about money stuff. He
yeah,
obsesses over it.
that's kind of true. So if anybody has any questions or would like just to discuss, whatever, that was discussed, either on the podcast or like, I've always had a question about this. You know, no question is off limits. I mean, if you want to talk about Bitcoin, we can go talk about Bitcoin. I don't, whatever. So, yeah, feel free to reach out.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can hear more of Image on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast at, or at redemptionwv.com/image, where you can also find any resources mentioned in our podcast and links to follow us on social media. And you can join the conversation by contacting us with any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions. Also, please rate our podcast and write a review at wherever you get your podcast, and that will help us ensure that this content gets to more people.